You've been living inside yourself for your entire life. Every thought, every feeling, every decision, every fear you've never told anyone about. You've had more access to yourself than any other human being on Earth ever could. And yet, there's a version of you that you have never met. A version that other people see clearly, that scientists can measure. That your own brain actively hides from you, not by accident, not through failure, but by design. The self you think you know is not the self that actually exists. And the gap between those two things is wider, stranger, and more consequential than most people are ever willing to accept. In 1955, two psychologists named Joseph Luft and Harrington Ingham sat down and mapped something that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. They called it the Johari Window. The idea was simple, elegant, and quietly devastating. They proposed that there are 4 distinct regions of the self. Things you know about yourself that others also know. Things others know about you that you don't know about yourself. Things only you know privately. And the largest region, the one that made their work genuinely unsettling, the things that neither you nor anyone else has access to. Yet, the unknown self, not unknown because it hasn't happened yet. Unknown because the human mind is architecturally incapable of seeing it directly, but the Johari Window was just the beginning. Because what came after, what decades of psychology, neuroscience, and behavioral research uncovered, made the Johari Window look almost optimistic. Here's something psychology knows with near certainty. You are a consistently unreliable narrator of your own life. Not occasionally, not when you're tired or stressed. Consistently, structurally, as a baseline feature of being human. Studies show that most people rate themselves above average in intelligence, kindness, humor, and morality, mathematically impossible, psychologically universal. This is called the above average effect. The brain builds a flattering self-image, then protects it from anything that threatens it. But it gets stranger. People are often just as wrong about their flaws. The traits they are most certain they don't have are often the ones everyone else sees most clearly. The person most convinced they're never defensive is usually the most defensive person in the room, and they genuinely don't know it. This is where the Dunning-Kruger effect enters the picture. Most people have heard of it. Most people have heard it wrong. It wasn't about stupid people thinking they're smart. It was something far more uncomfortable. The less competent you are, the less able you are to recognize it. Because the skills needed to perform well are often the same skills needed to judge yourself accurately, which means self-knowledge isn't just difficult. Sometimes it's impossible without outside perspective. You cannot see your own blind spots, by definition. And that applies to far more than skills. It applies to personality, values, relationship. The things you're most blind to are often the things you're least capable of noticing. But that wasn't the worst part. Because the brain doesn't just fail to see itself accurately, it actively works to prevent you from doing so. Psychologists call this ego-protective cognition. The brain's primary job was never truth. It was survival. And for a social species, protecting a stable self-image was part of that survival. So the brain developed powerful defenses: rationalization, projection, confirmation, bias, selective memory, not flaws, features automatic, unconscious, constantly running. Every time you've blamed someone else for a failure, your brain was doing its job. Every time you've remembered an argument and felt completely right, your brain was doing its job. Every time you felt more self-aware than everyone around you, your brain was probably doing its job. And here's the uncomfortable part. The people most protected from self-knowledge are often the ones most convinced they know themselves. The belief that you truly know yourself may be one of the brain's strongest defenses against actually knowing yourself. Here is what all of this is actually about. It's not about how flawed humans are. It's not about the impossibility of self-knowledge. It's about the difference between the self as a possession and the self as a practice. Most people treat identity as something they already have, fixed, familiar, known, but the research points somewhere else. The self is not a thing you have. It is a thing you do, and doing it well requires something the ego resists. Curiosity, not defending your behavior, not justifying it, understanding it. The willingness to ask difficult questions. Not why people misunderstand me, but what did my behavior communicate? Not why am I surrounded by difficult people, but what role do I play in the patterns I keep repeating? Because every serious psychological tradition eventually arrives at the same place. The examined life is not the comfortable life. It is the one where you face the version of yourself, revealed by your actions, your patterns, and other people's experience of you, and choose to stay in the room with it. There's a question the philosopher Epictetus asked his students, not who do you want to be? Who are you when nobody's watching and nothing is at stake? Because that version, the one in the quiet moments, the private reactions, the unguarded instincts, that is the truest data you have. Not the values you'd list if someone asked, not the person you are in your best moments, when you're rested and generous and the stakes are low. The person you are in your worst ones, the way you speak about people who aren't in the room. The thoughts you have when someone else succeeds, the things you tell yourself to avoid the thing you know you should do. That is the self that is running your life, and you cannot change what you refuse to see. The most radical act available to a human being is not self-improvement. It is not optimization or discipline or reinvention. It is the willingness to be honestly, uncomfortably, patiently curious about who you actually are, rather than who you have decided you must be. The self you think you know is a story. The self you actually are is still being written. And the only way to write it with any intention at all is to first be willing to read what's already on the page.